This video, called Betrayal and Deception, is about events in this building. This building is the Parliament of the United Kingdom. The French from the 18th century called England specifically Perfidious Albion because of diplomatic slights, duplicity and treachery and infidelity. They could not be trusted. This is two such stories. The first, a betrayal in 1708 of Scotland. The second, 1954, a betrayal of Scotland, but also the whole world community, and particularly the UN, as a state, England, tried to cover up what it had done to Scotland in 1708. In 1708, England made Scotland a colony, but I believe it was part of the plan all along. So I'm going to give you an overview now, which is covered by some of my other videos, so take this as an overview. Between the 1300s and the late 1800s, Northwest Europe had a drop in temperature known as the Mini Ice Age, and that affected Scotland badly, and the coldest time was between 1690 and 1700. Indeed, people died of famine due to the weather effect on agriculture. But there was trade restrictions put on Scotland as well, nothing to do with the 1708 Act, but simply England was greedy and it didn't want Scotland to have wealth, his northern neighbour, so they banned Scotland from trading with France and the Netherlands and banned them from any colonies in the Caribbean or the Western Atlantic in the Americas. Despite this, Scotland had a go at a new colony, which the Royal Navy forced to close and didn't start again until after the 1707 Union. The biggest effect on Scotland wasn't just the weather and the effects on the economy of these blockades, but the Darien colony was a manipulated event by the Scottish wealthy people, the elite, working with England to set up a false colony that was never going to succeed in the Isthmus of Panama. That was funded by private donations from many people in Scotland. So when the planned failure occurred, this just added to the distress of the Scottish nation. From 1699, in a random way, the Royal Navy of England blockaded certain ports to disrupt trade. And there was propaganda from 1703 saying how great it would be, how helpful it would be if we all became one country. Indeed, Queen Mary was so concerned she wrote a letter about it in 1703. The Scottish Parliament reconvened in 1703. It had been closed in 1689 and the country had been run by the Convention of the Estates, but you needed a Parliament to sign the treaty. So it was reconvened under pressure from the elite within Scotland. There was a big push in 1704 into 5 about the prosperity of a union with England. So much so that both parliaments wrote the Articles of Union in 1706 to say what was going to happen, and the treaty was signed in 1707. The thing was, the treaty was never going to work because it promised things and said things that under the constitution of the two countries could never happen in reality. But this was a smokescreen, so that in 1708, under the guise of the Treason Act and harmonising treason between Scotland and England, they put the crown of England over Scotland, and that act did in effect make Scotland a colony. But first, a couple of words about the 1707 treaty. Liberation Scotland in June 24 showed by looking closely at the constitutional setup in Scotland and in England that the promised union to one sovereign state and one crown, which the Treaty of Union states, is physically impossible. It could not happen. And then in May 25, Robert Black, a King's Counsel, looked at what actually happened, not what's written in the law and in the treaties, but what actually happened, and he concluded that the sovereignty of Scotland stopped when the Parliament closed, but England continued before, with no change, making Scotland a colony. He confirmed Liberation Scotland's statement. If you want more information on all this, look at these 3 videos here, which I'll list at the back of this video. So here we have the Treason Act, the betrayal I've been alluding to. The Treason Act on paper says that its purpose was to harmonise the Treason Acts of Scotland and the Treason Acts of England, over succeeding it and replacing it with this 1708 Act. But the Treaty of Union 1707 said that the laws of Scotland stayed in the laws of Scotland and could not be altered or changed by the new Parliament of Great Britain. This was the first attempt within a year and a half of the 1707 treaty of the first change being pushed. But look here, it refers to the English Treason Act of 1547 and the Coin Act of 1696, the precursors to the 1708 Act. If, as the 1707 treaty said, that the 2 parliaments of Scotland and England closed, disappeared and were replaced by a new parliament called GB, then why are the acts of the English Parliament listed here as precursors? Section 3 of the Act required the Scottish courts to try cases of treason, which in those days involved different things to do with land and so on, to use English procedures and rules, in violation once again of the treaty. It also said that the Great Seal of Scotland, which was related to land ownership and land transactions, which have been going since the time of Robert the Bruce in the early 1300s, should stop, and the Lords of Session shouldn't sit in judgment to do with treason in Scotland. What this did was put the Crown of England over Scotland, again in violation of the treaty, of the 1707 treaty, and made Scotland a colony. This was all, in my opinion, part of the plan. If you look at the details in what I'm telling you in this report, this video, you can see that the Treaty of 1707 could never happen. First, a bit of background about deception. I need to tell you about the setup of the United Nations, which happened in March 1945. On the map here in dark blue, you can see the main countries that were colonised by America and European powers. Also, lots of islands scattered around the world were obviously part of this. One of the first things the UN really got their teeth into was the removal, as quick as possible, of colonies to reassert people's individual rights. So the purpose was to end colonialism and allow people to be self-determinant and run themselves. They even clarified that the rights of people, were higher than the rights of the state control within each country. And the UN set up a decolonisation organisation, which is still in use today and still working today, to look at people's proposals for self-determination, evaluating them and then helping them to get their self-determination. The UK gave all these countries numbered here their independence in different year groups here. Today, according to the official narrative of Westminster, these are the last remnant of empire, all islands with the exception of Gibraltar. But the deception is that this country, also a colony, is not on the list, hence the purpose for the deception. Different parts came together with England at the dates shown here. Scotland thought it was going into an equal union and a new country of JB, but it wasn't, because in 1708, as I said, we became a colony. The UK government was concerned that the efforts of the United Nations and other countries to remove colonies would actually people ask questions about Scotland's status. So they decided to cover it up and create a new story, a new narrative. So in 1952, under the guise of the Scottish Affairs Committee, they set up a royal commission to review the union with Scotland. It started on October 52, and these were the people that were in it. It says at the top of it, the review with reference to the financial, economic, administrative and other considerations involved and arrangements for exercising the functions of Her Majesty's Government with respect to Scotland. Nothing to do with that, and additional to that, and at the beginning of the Commission, there was a big statement that Scotland's union with England was voluntary by both parties. They knew it wasn't because they created the 1708 Act many years before. This was the first instance on written record in the United Kingdom that Scotland came into a voluntary union, and it gets raised often, as it did indeed during the Scottish independence referendum of 2014. After a long debate, they patted themselves on the back and said that Scotland has had great benefit from the Union. They didn't mention what happened in the years before that and since to exploit Scotland and its people. They looked at all the detailed operations, methodically going through it, and decided that nothing needed changed. It was a sterling effort that the UK Parliament was doing. But the report was finished, and it was stated by the Prime Minister on November 1954 that it will be tabled to the House. No debate was allowed at that time, but Joe Grimmond, a Scottish MP, said this: "Is the Prime Minister aware that the enthusiasm with which these proposals have been given and received in Scotland has been so subdued as not to be noticeable? They by no means satisfy the many people of all parties who desire Scotland to have more control." The full debate on the Royal Commission report happened in February 1955. The only change that came out of it, the only change, was that the Secretary of State for Scotland, that position would be made part of the official UK cabinet, and they referred to him as in effect the Prime Minister of Scotland. They talked about the voluntary union. They talked about devolution and rejected everything other than the voluntary union. This was the first time, as I said. So what happened is the UK government then pushed the world to know and state that it was a voluntary union, and they went at it really well, because most people in the world, and nearly everyone in the UK that doesn't look into this, believes that we are in a voluntary union. Because it was a Royal Commission report, requested through the Queen in Parliament. This in effect made Scotland a colony twice. So to end this brief video, the 1708 betrayal made Scotland a colony. It ignored the 1707 treaty promises because these were impossible according to the two countries' constitutions, and this was proven by a KC that it did not happen. The promises of 1707 treaty, none of them came into existence other than the fact the Scottish Parliament closed. This was the first time the voluntary union was mentioned. They made us a colony again and confirmed the crown over Scotland. So these two acts, this act and report basically said, let's just continue the way we are. Thank you very much for listening to my video. I've created all these videos, and if you look at my YouTube channel, Robert Anderson 9116, you'll find all these. Simply go into YouTube, say yes or no to their cookie policy, and then in the request line just type in Robert Anderson 9116. I intend to do these videos next. The next one will be cost of colonisation, and then I think I'll do the bottom one, too wee, too stupid, too small.